And welcome. You are listening live to Three Women. I'm your host, Sherry DeNovo, MPP Parkdale High Park. And we are all about feminism today. And we've got some amazing guests in studio. So that means, yes, it does, that you can phone us, 416-946-7000 if you want to ask a question or engage in conversation on air. Or you can tweet me at CHERIDINOVO, my name, if you're the shy type and you want to engage in the conversation, make a comment, which we will respond to. So in studio, we've got Jess Beaulieu. She's a comedian, writer, actor, producer, feminist, and activist who co-hosts and co-produces a weekly comedy podcast called The Crimson Wave about, get this, the glory of periods, and was voted one of BlogTO's top 10 Toronto podcasts in 2015. She also co-produces and co-hosts other weekly comedy shows. And we also have Sarah Ratchford. She's a feminist journalist who's passionate about women's issues and gender politics. She writes and makes documentaries about reproductive health access, sex work, and the justice system's treatment of women, among other topics, for Vice Canada. Sarah holds a Master of Journalism from Ryerson, and her work has also appeared in The Star, Cosmopolitan, and on the CP Newswire. So welcome, Sarah. Welcome, Jess, to Three Women.
Hi. Great to be here.
Yeah, so Jess, I'm just dying with curiosity, as I'm sure everybody out there in the land is. So give us a little snippet of what you talk about on The Crimson Wave.
Well, we talk about menstruation for the most part, as well as sexuality, relationships, women's issues. We talk about astrology a lot, it seems. That comes up quite often.
Those lunar cycles.
Yes, the moon, right? It's all connected to the moon. You know, the moon schedules our periods. Or so I believe. I do believe in that. But it's mostly just a bunch of women chatting about their cycles and everything associated with that, all of the emotions, all of the products that we use.
That's so cool. And you had quite a success. I know there was Irene Matheson who brought in this bill originally federally. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So Natalie Norman is my co-host of The Crimson Wave, and she and I co-wrote and co-starred in a video for No Tax on Tampons for the campaign with Jill Pibiak, who was running it. And it did really well on YouTube. We basically talked about how menstruation products are taxed, and then we went through a grocery store and talked about how all these other items aren't, that are so-called essential items, but menstruation products apparently weren't. It did really well. People seemed to really like it or really hate it. And there was a lot of fake blood used in the video. There was a prop guy, and he had to make a lot of fake blood. He had never done it before, so...
So cool. And of all people, Stephen Harper made this so.
Yes, I can't believe it.
Before he, left office. Win. And so, Sarah, tell me about your work. Like, what are you working on right now? Any articles? Or?
Sure, yeah. So the most recent thing, I guess, I'll give you as an example, as opposed to giving away the story that I'm currently working on. I just wrote a piece about how, in the wake of this Ghomeshi trial, as we wait for the verdict, basically the system needs to change. And women have been saying this for ages. So have other feminists, but what I talk about is just some of the ways in which that might change. So could we have a court just for sexual assault trials? Could we have better training for people within the system? What could we work on in that regard? So that's what my work is always focused on, is really how the system can better treat women.
So let's talk about the Ghomeshi trial, because we have to, essentially, as feminists. His lawyer, a woman, used the whack attack, as so-called, on those women who were testifying against him. Talk about that, Sarah. Like, she's doing her job, right? No?
Yeah, it's a really tough discussion to have, and it's really way more nuanced than some of us might like it to be, I guess. She's a woman and she's doing her job and she's killing it. And, we don't want to hate her, but at the same time, it might be nicer to have her on our side. But then, she's looking at these circumstances like cases. It's not always all about the politics, right? So, she's probably put in a tough spot too. And I wonder about that because, she's done some feminist work in the past. So I'm not sure what to think about that, other than I wish the Crown had had more to say to her rather than acting like a kitten in her shadow and sort of cowering and asking if he might speak. I wish she'd had a better match, essentially, in that courtroom.
What really struck me as being strange, and again, this is where was the crown in all of this is the question, I suppose. But I mean, federally, the Supreme Court has weighed in that it doesn't matter if you consent. I mean, this is clearly the case in domestic violence, where a woman is living with her abuser. It doesn't matter if you keep going back. It doesn't matter if you say you love him. It doesn't matter if you even ask for it. Assault is assault. If somebody pounds you in the head, it's assault. So it'll be, I mean, obviously we're waiting for the verdict, and it's a judge, which may be good, maybe not, we don't know. But at the end of the day, that seemed to play very little in this case.
It really did, and it never really does tend to get enough attention, right? Like, had they had experts in there to speak to some of what trauma might look like, or the interactions between someone who's been assaulted and, you know, someone who's abusing them, that would have really helped shed light on the realities of this sort of thing. You know, women across the country are sexually assaulted by people they know. That's generally who does this. And you can't necessarily cut off ties, right? Especially here, there's a power imbalance. These women had budding careers in the arts. This was an arts host, right, who was famous. There's no question about that. Like, I've been sexually assaulted by people who I'm still friends with. What do? Cut people out? No. Does it mean it's not a crime? No.
Well, really, when you look at the stats, most women are sexually assaulted by somebody they say they love. They love. And that's just simply the case. Do you want to weigh in on this, Jess? What did you think as you were watching this go down?
It was, it was really hard to take in. That's for sure. I was keeping up to date. I was reading about it daily and reading about the witness accounts and how the defense was, cross-examining. I mean, it was triggering for me, and I think it was triggering for a lot of women. I know that friends of mine who've been sexually assaulted, I was in a very verbally abusive relationship for years, and I definitely related to a lot of what they were saying, and I also, my heart hurt so deeply for them. And I know that a lot of women, especially across the country, were really feeling that. I think there's been a lot of discussion recently about assault against women in comedy as well. Beth Stelling, who's a great stand-up comedian, recently posted an image on Instagram with some bruises for some violence that was done against her by a boyfriend, and it kind of started this new conversation about assault and harassment in comedy as well. So it's definitely been discussed on social media a lot lately, and with the Ghomeshi trial and the Twitter harassment trial with Steph Guthrie and Heather Riley, that it's a conversation that's being had. So it's been a difficult time, I think, for a lot of women.
In this case, do you think this is going to put the chill on women coming forward?
Yes.
Okay, say more.
More so than it already is. I mean, really, just to piggyback a bit on what Jess said, I felt terribly triggered as well after this happened, and no time that I've ever been assaulted have I considered coming forth with this, because police would have said, you've already had sex with this man, right? Or you've invited him into your life in this way or that way. Women already don't report because they know they won't be believed. Unless there is specific DNA evidence, it's so hard to have a conviction made in a case like this, right? And that's why we need reform. Women now, if famous women are coming forth and saying this sort of thing, why would Jane Doe from Buttfuck wherever come forth and say this sort of thing? Right? Yeah,
and at the end of the day, I mean, there's been speculation about either way. Whatever the verdict is, what do you think is going to happen to John Ghomeshi after this? Do you think is he going to bounce back?
Yeah, I hope not. But with the history of abusive men in power, if you have money, if you're rich, if you have a following, if you're famous, I mean, you do tend to bounce back a lot easier. You get away with a lot of stuff. I mean, again, to bring it back to comedy, I mean, you look at Bill Cosby, and even still,
like, how many women does it take?
Yeah, and they have on record him admitting
take down one powerful man.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he said, what? Oh, I gave them some Quaaludes.
Yeah,
Oops.
he's like, he said on record, I've drugged women. And still people are defending him. And it's outrageous. It really is.
His wife among many.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking. I mean, that's a case. So how many women does it take how many women's word does it take against one powerful man's word? I mean, that's really what the equivalency is in my head.
Absolutely. And then on one powerful system, right? Like I wrote my thesis on the ways in which, when I did my master's, the justice system doesn't properly deal with this kind of case. One woman told me she was raped repeatedly by her husband over the course of years and years, violently. Sorry, this is a trigger warning for everyone out there, but violently, anally raped, and he would film the assaults. He would film the special assaults, which happened on their anniversaries and other special dates because he liked it that way. Finally, she told her friend at church, here's what's happening to me. And she said, oh, I don't think that sounds normal. She took it to police. The Crown made her watch all of the videos and count how many times she had said no. It was 35 times. The Crown said, looks like you liked it. And it was thrown out.
Yeah. So there you go. That's why women don't come forward.
Absolutely.
Plain and simple. So yeah, let's, moving on. By the way, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Three Women here on CIUT 89.5 FM. Sherry DeNova, your host. I've got Jess Beaulieu, comedian, podcaster in the studio live. And we've also got Sarah Ratchford, journalist, Vice Canada, and others in the studio, both feminists. We're talking about the F word, but we're also talking about how that F word's making news right now out there in the world. Twitter harassment trial, my God, another one. So first thoughts there, Jess, you raised it.
Yeah, I mean, that was, again, upsetting for so many reasons. I think that also when the verdict came, the fact that so many supporters of Gregory Allen Elliott, who's the accused, took to Twitter and then harassed women involved in the trial, and then harassed not only them, their friends, their family, strangers, just any woman really, and lots of men too who were tweeting in support of the victims, were dealing with their own extreme level of harassment. And I thought that was just like a whole, I mean, I don't even know how to begin dissecting that, about how they're like, see, you're wrong. He wasn't harassing you, and I'm going to prove that by harassing you. As if like that makes any sense.
Well, there's a lot of conjecture in that
Yes.
case about the judge's role, who
Yes.
didn't even understand social media at all. Sarah, what do you think?
Oh, I think that was utterly preposterous to watch. I was there the day of the verdict, and the judge was sitting there grinning to the point where people at the break were whispering to each other, what is going on? What is this judge smiling about? And people on Facebook were writing me, who were also in the courtroom, saying, what is going on? He would smile even more whenever Twitter was mentioned, tweeted as if it was a game for children, and if the whole thing was hilarious, and that no one should have any feelings about it because, it's just words. Well, guess what? The reason why these words matter isn't in and of themselves. A man can call me any number of names. Go ahead. You can say whatever you want about me if it makes you feel more secure. The reason why these words have weight is the reality of violence against women in Canada, right? A woman is killed by her intimate partner every 17 days, right, in Canada. And so that starts with violent language, with stalking, with not taking no for an answer, with not backing down. And so if that kind of behavior is sanctioned on the internet is real life. And this is the thing that the judge did not get, right?
He didn't obviously get that people need to be on the internet, that this isn't just a game, that you actually need to be on the internet to do most jobs these days, and that you can't just say, well, just don't tweet or just go on Twitter. That's not an option anymore than saying don't use your computer if what you see on it offends you. I mean, this is absurd.
Absolutely. And I know that Steph Guthrie, who was, again, one of the victims, that she was being contacted in every forum possible on the internet. It wasn't just Twitter specific. It was Facebook, it was email, it was Instagram, it was everywhere. So how are you supposed to survive at all if you can't use the internet in any capacity? I mean, exactly what you said. You can't do your job via snail mail.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that struck me as kind of odd, and I think, Sarah, we had this conversation, but that in a sense it's high school principals get it better than this judge did. I mean, because they know that bullying produces suicides in kids. They know it does, online bullying, and they see it. And so there's the Pink Day, and it's not just about LGBTQ issues. It's also about bullying. People get that bullying kills, and so we're sensitive about it with kids, so teenagers, but not for adults. Like, this is bizarre. So the high school principals are kind of ahead of the ahead of judges in this country now. It's it's really, really odd because that's the new thing, right? Like you break up with somebody, and you did, like he took some sexy photos of you, and all of a sudden it's all over the world, and he's giving people your address. There's got to be some reaction that we have in our arsenal about that. What do you think? I mean, what can we do about that now? Like, it's sort of open season on women in a sense. So, how do we begin to turn that around?
Yeah, well, I guess there have to be consequences for these actions, right? And this was because this was this first trial of its kind. There unfortunately weren't any consequences. In fact, like the Gregory Allen Elliott, who was accused, it got money out of it. He raised a bunch of money. I mean, he's also an artist, so I'm sure he's gained some new followers there. He definitely has the support of so many men and women across the country, across the world, really. Because this was got a lot of international attention as well. So I think that's probably, the first step is looking into changing legislation in a way, to make this act illegal, like online harassment. I don't, it's like what Sarah said. I mean, changing the system, which is a lot harder than saying that. So it takes a lot of years to do that. You've
thought about this, Sarah. What can we do about it?
Right. So, I mean, as you say, it does take a lot of years to change a system, but I think we need, so I'm talking to different women right now in the community, pretty high profile feminist women, about just getting together and finding a way to rise above this. And so I think that will have a lot to do with underground online systems that already exist. I'm part of probably 5 secret Facebook groups.
Oh, me too.
Right? Where rapists and abusers are listed by name. Mm-hmm. We know who you are, guys, right? Your eye color is on there, your MO and your height is on there, your job is on there. We know. Women are not signing up to work with you because they know you're an abuser. So it's more about this DIY sort of almost punk resistance that's happening really underground. And so we just need to work on building that and say, F this other system that was not designed for us. That's the other thing we need to start looking at. Who designed this system, right? It doesn't work for people of color or women or Indigenous people. Who made these laws and whose wrongful lifestyle are they continuing to uphold, right?
Well, of course, the contrary to this would say, well, I mean, it's just words, right? Sticks and stones, blah, blah, blah. Words can never hurt you. It's just a new form of words. It's on Twitter, people get pissed off at other people all the time. Take it out. Just ignore it. Just delete it. Don't pay attention to it. What would we say to that?
I would say it's hilarious the degree to which free speech comes up for these people as a defense, but it only applies to them. They don't want women to have free speech, right? They want what they say to be taken without punishment.
Absolutely.
I think it's hilarious.
Because there are laws against hate speech.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, and maybe those laws are the way to go because you can't, Twitter even enforces this sometimes, right? So
totally, yeah. And I know we were going to talk about Rouge V at one point.
I'm going to raise it next.
Okay, perfect. Because I was just having a debate with somebody about hate speech, actually, and its definition under law. Because I was saying that I think that Rouge V actually engages in hate speech in a lot of ways, but also because he encourages his followers to assault women, basically. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what I'm not super knowledgeable about every aspect of law, but is that not considered hate speech?
I raise this too when the times he's come to Toronto. Partly, I think the problem with the internet is multi-jurisdictional, right?
Right.
It's like this guy lives in the States. So if you can't stop him at the border, which I think they should, all the mayors have come out and said, we don't want him here, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, let's talk about it for somebody out there who doesn't know who Rouge V is. I hate to give him airtime, but who is Rouge V? Sarah, tell us, who is Rouge V?
Rouge V is what they call a PUA. He has written books on this subject and organizes conferences to get quote unquote men's rights activists and pickup artists together to help them get into the pants of women who aren't interested because apparently that's their right.
Mm-hmm. So here's just to tie the two together between Twitter and Rouge V. So I just got this today. Actually, didn't know she didn't know the show was going to be on this topic, but she said must read why rapist, reductionist fanatics are a danger for us all, and then gave me the sample of this tweet from one of his followers, obviously, who says, have you ever wanted to bang a girl who isn't interested in you? Well, now you can. Introducing the Roosh Roofie. Mm-hmm. Referring to the drug, of course. Like this is, this is rape. This is advocating rape, essentially,
Yes.
By any definition of rape in any jurisdiction. So why isn't there action about this?
I don't know. I guess it goes back to them just being words. I'm not sure. It is upsetting to me, and it's confusing because also when he wasn't all those meetings that he was trying to orchestrate recently in North America, and there was going to be one in Toronto in Queen's Park. Is that right?
Well, the demonstration against it was in Queen's Park, and
yes.
and then his followers said that they were going to rally in Queen's Park, and then of course nobody showed up.
Nobody showed up. Yeah.
I mean, bottom line is it's a lot. I mean, he kind of is a master of his own media hype, really,
right?
Which is why I don't like giving him airtime. But you have to because he's not alone. I mean, that's the other problem. He's not alone. I mean, this kind of person on Twitter exists, and there's lots of them. There's tens of thousands of them, in fact, and they harass women. That's what they do.
Yeah, and especially with that event, I remember reading in particular that any woman who entered Queen's Park at the time of that meeting, any person who wasn't a cisgender straight man was supposed to be punished. So that to me is a violent threat, and I would consider that illegal, but...
Which he has made good on, apparently, with some women activists, and just simply because I know them, he's published their addresses to his followers, where their children go to school, that sort of thing. So this is not... He's actually followed through on some of that because most people are relatively easy to find, if you really set your mind to it. Not that anything's happened out of it, but it just goes to show you the power of social media and the net, and that there's got to be some way we can rein this in. What about Twitter? Like, why doesn't Twitter do something?
I don't know. I mean, like you say, there's really nothing benign about his sentiments whatsoever, right? What about Twitter?
Why don't they that should immediately, they should be throwing people off Twitter, denying them rights to tweet when they're, I mean, there's power in social media too, that needs to be called into question here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just boils down to the fact that women's bodies are still really seen as male property when men so choose. I really think it's as simple as that. And I think we need to create change around that, but that starts at an educational level, like you said earlier, right? Schools are doing a better job at focusing on this sort of thing than society at large, right? But you're right, Twitter should be shutting these people down because every so often someone loses it and shoots a bunch of women because they won't have sex with him, right? So Twitter should really be not sanctioning this. I don't know why they're not. There's no answer.
Yeah. In terms of, I mean, this has been going on like this. I mean, social media is just a new platform for this, really. I mean, this attitude has been there for a while. But what's sad, really, I think, and where meets real people is in real places, is that the rate of sexual assault is not going down. No. So the same numbers of domestic violence incidents, the same. I mean, we keep maybe better track, but the reality is it's not shifting the way one would expect if the educational system is shifting, which it has, and which attitudes are shifting, which they have in part. That hasn't happened. Do you think this is a backlash to like the third wave of feminism? Is this a backlash reaction to the gains women have made? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised about, with men taking back their power. I mean, I think that I talk about this a lot in my writing and my comedy on my podcast about how sexism is still so prevalent in personal relationships as well, which is, again, where like a lot of sexual assault happens with lovers, with partners, with friends, with
and this is kind of
members.
Shocking to me. I mean, I'm an old broad, but like looking at the two of you, and you're two young, attractive women, smart, feminist, out there dating, presumably. Like it's shocking, I think, that you have been assaulted. It's shocking. What is your response to that?
Well, my response is that, as I said, men think that women's bodies are their property. Media does nothing to dispel that notion, right? And women also, I've written about this before. So women, when we're young, I think, when we get that attention from men, it feels like a violation on the one hand, but on another hand, it feels like, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Male attention is a thing that I should want. Maybe I should be flattered by this. It feels confusing, right? Because you're that object of desire, but you've also just been completely violated on a personal level, right? And so I've been raped before by a partner that I was already being intimate with at that time, right? And what happened was a sex act that I already said I don't want to engage in, and he just went ahead and initiated this sex act without my consent, actually with my express statement that no was always going to be the answer, right? And so I think he was confused. I think if I were to tell him that was actually a rape, he wouldn't even understand, right? So you say that change isn't happening even though this is better within schools. Well, little kids are understanding, I think, the idea of consent a bit better, or young people, teenagers, but adults, the people that are having sex, it's too late for them, right? So we need to find another educational system beyond the official one that teaches young kids in order to sort of dispel some of this, right?
So it's a good place to take a bit of a break. We're going to play a tune. We're going to do some station ID and come back. Again, you're listening to Three Women here, 89.5 FM. And your host, Sherry DeNovo, MPP Parkdale High Park, with Jess Beaulieu and Sarah Ratchford in studio. Thank you for your tweets. If you want to call in, 416-946-7000 with comment, question for our studio guests, or tweet me as always. Back in a minute.
Festers like a bad song. Who am I to complain? A good home is hard to find. Dead dogs don't flutter. Your eyes were like hollows of madness. Dead dogs don't flutter. Your eyes were like hollows of madness. We turn our heads, we don't look back. Never could thrill or enthrall you. Darling, all my love will age before it's breathless, but still wrapped in light. Caught between the devil and
Did you know there are now 8 different ways in which you can listen to your favorite programs on CIUT? From Barrie to Buffalo, Kitchener to Cobourg, you can pick us up on 89.5 FM. We also stream online at www.ciut.fm, on Rogers Digital Cable, Channel 946, Channel 970 on Bell 5 TV. Star Choice Satellite offers CIUT on Channel 826, and you can pick us up on the TuneIn Radio app and under College and Campus Radio on iTunes. Finally, you can listen or download CIUT program archives at ciut.fm. CIUT 89.5 FM, delivering the new sound of your city everywhere.
And we're back. You're listening to Three Women here. Sherry Genova, your host. Jess Beaulieu in studio, comedian, writer, producer, and feminist, as is Sarah Ratchford, who journalist, writes for Vice Canada, among others. And we're talking about feminism. Yeah, we're talking about feminism 2016. And Kesha was mentioned. Just talk about that situation. I was listening to. I just watched a bit of the Brit Awards, and there was Adele talking about this at the mic.
And Lady Gaga actually just at the Oscars last night, I think, I'm not sure, she did like a performance. She sang a song and kind of brought out a bunch of sexual assault victims, partly I think to show support to Kesha. So Kesha was assaulted by her, I believe he was her record producer. Is that correct, Sarah? Do you know? I think he's a record producer. His name is Dr. Luke, and she has a contract with Sony to make, I believe, I think it's 5 or 6 more albums. Correct? And she recently was trying to get out of the contract so she could create music with other labels. Especially with another producer, as opposed to having to work with the producer who assaulted her. And she was denied that. So now she is locked into this contract and she can't create music elsewhere, which is what she does. And it's been being talked about right now on social media a lot. I don't think many people even realize it. I think people had noticed that Kesha wasn't making music for several years now, but nobody really knew why. And it's just so tragic. Like, she's already become a victim of assault, and now her career is being like destroyed. Basically, like she has no other options. How much more of her life can be ruined through this situation?
Right, totally.
It's like,
yeah. And the system doesn't care. Her label doesn't care. The only people who care are other women. So people like Adele, people like Lady Gaga, such as she did, people like Taylor Swift donating money to her legal costs or whatever that is, right? It's only women who are standing up for her, again, in this sort of DIY way. Like, I got you, girl. Don't worry that no one else cares.
So let's talk about consent. Let's talk about the other side. What is, I mean, because I was saying to you at the break that, you're a teenage boy, you're just discovering your sexuality, you're looking at how do I make my way in the world without being, do I have to, because again, when you see the media's portrayal of women, and I'll go back to that, I think a couple of times, but I've been watching older movies where it's the kiss, right? The guy grabs the woman, she kisses her, she struggles a little bit and then succumbs. And that's the beginning of their great love affair. That's how love was really pictured back then, was, the guy makes the move, it's aggressive, it's assertive, it's against the woman's will, but oh my God, something in his kiss, right? And then you succumb. So, not only girls are being raised on this, boys are being raised on this too. Just pretend for a minute, you're the mother of a teenage boy. What do you tell him to navigate his way in the world of heterosexual sex?
Number one is clarity, right? So as much as we'd like sex to always be a clear and excitable yes answer, sometimes it doesn't always unfold that way, right? But you want to really just set yourself up to try for that. So tell her you're interested in her, ask if you can take her out, ask for the first few, can I put my arm around you? Can I kiss you? That sort of thing. Then you pay attention to their body language, and if they're really leaning into you and into it and not stopping and not being sort of pushing you away at all, right? Then, see gently if you might keep going with that or ask, right? You really want that clarity to be there as much as you can.
And just on the women's side, on consent side, how do women voice that it's okay, it's not okay? Like young women especially. Because,
I think there are a lot of signals and signs and ways to communicate that aren't even necessarily verbal. I think that, like personally for me, I have sexual intercourse with men and women, and in both cases, I'm usually pretty vocal. I ask permission a lot. Sometimes during the actual act, I'm not continuously, asking questions, but I'm very good. I'm very perceptive. Let's say that. And I think that it's good to, especially when I'm like receiving pleasure as well, to continually acknowledge that I'm still enjoying this. I think that, the partner has a responsibility also to be perceptive, to continually check in. Because if someone has gone silent and you look at their face and they look incredibly, upset or angry or sad or scared, maybe, do a check-in there. And I think that a lot of times people get wrapped up in themselves, which I understand. You're having sex. There's a lot going on, but it's important to acknowledge that you're doing this with another human being and that they might be reacting to the situation differently from you. Definitely if there's pushing away or there's crying or there's, screaming in a way that sounds scary as opposed to pleasurable, I would just ask the question. I think there's nothing unsexy about that.
It's true, and that can bring you closer too, right? If the person
Yes.
opens up to you and says, I don't like this thing, and maybe they do or do not tell you why, right? But that brings you more trust on an intimate level, so the sex can get better.
Absolutely. I think communication during sex is so important on every level. I think that a lot of women, even that I know, a lot of heterosexual women in particular, we're socialized in this way to be quiet, to be polite, to not ruffle feathers, to not voice our opinions or our dislike of something. And this is especially true when it comes to sex. And I know a lot of women that, even if they're receiving pleasure, and it's not that they necessarily don't like it, but they don't like it. They're kind of neutral to it, but they're not really expressing that. And I think that, we need to teach like heterosexual men to ask, and we also need to encourage heterosexual women to voice their desires and their wants and needs.
I think the increase and there's definitely been an increase in sort of online, sort of porn, and as we were talking about, really avatars, almost sex online. Do you think this has affected the sexual interactions between, everyone, men and women, but particularly because what porn stars do is very different from real life usually.
Yes.
And if that's your sexual education, if that's your primary form of sexual education, you have a pretty skewed view of what a real woman is about. Sarah, you wanted to
Absolutely. I've been with people who, it's been clear that that's where they have managed to derive their sexual education, right? They make porny sounds and things like this. And I'm just there, I'm feeling like I'm in a circus and gently telling them, hun, maybe you might want to do this or that thing, seeing as how I'm a real person. But then you have to be nice about it, right? And manage their emotions. It's not necessarily their fault that no one sat them down to speak about sexuality, right? That's uncomfortable for a parent. It can be awkward and everything else. But, yeah. To Jess's point about women wanting to speak up, a lot of that has to do with managing men's emotionality, right? We don't want this man to get mad at us. We don't want to lose his attention, and we don't want to potentially be in an unsafe scenario where this man I maybe hardly know is now angry because I've insulted his manhood, right? It's a constant balancing act.
Yeah, and I think that we also, more so than even encouraging women to voice their opinions, we need to encourage men to show show any slight concern for the woman they're having sex with. So in terms of porn, what I notice, interestingly enough, is this is very TMI maybe for some people, I don't know, not for me, but the kind of porn that I usually watch is often lesbian porn, and the reason for that is because women both experience pleasure.
Yeah.
And when you watch heterosexual porn, it's very different from that. And now that I if I ever do watch heterosexual porn, I notice that it is purely for the man.
Yes.
Like the woman, you rarely see women orgasm even in heterosexual porn. You see their bodies being moved in these ways where I'm like, I know she doesn't like that. I know that's not comfortable. And so we're educating men, straight heterosexual men, we're educating them this way and teaching them that sex is for them only. They're the focus. They're the only ones who have a right to make any decisions in regards to what the next steps are or what's going to happen.
I mean, it raises the whole issue of sex education.
Yes, for sure.
I happen to have been there when the Ontario government brought in many years too late, upgrades to the sex education program, which quite frankly, we're not that radical.
No.
I mean, things like it's okay to be gay. I mean, really, like we've
Here's
been
what
there,
oral sex is.
but the backlash of that was phenomenal at parents, but not only parents, and not only from religious communities. I happened to go and speak in a class, a grade 10 class about civics, and that's what the kids wanted to speak about. Again, more working class, racialized communities, sadly, but they were all up in arms about the new sex. It was too much information, which is pretty shocking, I think. So the question is, that's where kids and adults are kind of at. So what should be happening with sex education? Like, what should it look like to have a healthy sex education, and where should it start, and what should it look like?
Kids need to be taught that sex can be pleasurable, and this isn't church, and it's not just for reproductive purposes, right? Men need to know where the clitoris is and actually pay attention to it. And to do that, they have to know what it is and what it does, right? Sex is fun. Kids are going to do it anyway. The shame has to be really taken away. Mm-hmm. And, if people want to watch porn, there's a lot of great people out there like Shine Louise Houston, Courtney Treble, Nikki Silver, feminist pornographers who are showing you, right, how a real body works. And it's real sex as close to you can get on camera. So that could help for kids to explore proper pornography.
Can you imagine your guidance counselors or your homeroom teacher or something in grade 9?
No.
Showing this? I mean, can you imagine the uproar that would be, even in the most progressive schools? Actually, some of our progressive schools might be okay with it. But
I went to Catholic school, so it definitely didn't happen there. I went to Catholic elementary school and Catholic high school. My mother's super into abstinence, so I definitely experienced so much shame. And people often ask me how I became the person that I am, this really outspoken, sex positive menstruation activist. And I say often it's because I went to Catholic school and because I was told to be quiet for so many years that when
you're making up for lost time.
Yeah, I am. And I think that it's so important. And I think these are such big issues. And I think that, again, I feel that, this is why I write a lot about personal relationships between men and women, especially heterosexual men and women, but no matter your sexual orientation as well, is that this is the beginning of where a lot of oppression starts, is in personal relationships that then become like ideologies, right? So, and I think that we need to begin there, and that's why sex education is so important, because if a young boy learns to disrespect women sexually, or ones that he's in relationships with, or even towards his mother, he's going to carry that throughout his life, and it'll it might get more violent as the years go on. That's where it begins. That's the root of the problem. So we have to start there.
What do you think, Sarah? Good sex education, what does it look like?
I mean, again, just it looks like a focus on people's body parts, a focus on the fact that sex is fun, that focus on connecting with your partner. And, consent, what's that saying? Consent is sexy. My little brother is 20 years old, and I was sitting in the car driving he and his friend somewhere, and his friend was also a young man around 20 and said, I'm so sick and tired of hearing that slogan. Consent is mandatory. It doesn't have it, right? But it can also be sexy. You can have like a hot discussion about what you're each into, right? And it can be like a form of foreplay. You can get it out of the way and then go forth and do what you want. You can do that in like a public space so that it's sort of of secretive between the two of you. And schools need to just focus on the fact that this is two people having fun. It's healthy, right? It's not to be afraid of.
Like, why wouldn't you want to ask someone what they like sexually? I don't understand that. I mean, I do that all the time. I wouldn't want to have sex with someone if I didn't know what they liked, because I'd be lost. I'd be like, is this what you want? Is this not what you want? Help me so I can get you there, And I'm very vocal about what I like, but there is something so respectful about someone saying, can I have some notes? Are you enjoying this? What can I do to improve? And that's how most other human relationships operate. Like, if you think of sex as more of a job, and they're like, we're here to work together and create something great and help each other. So please give me some feedback so I can improve. Like, that's what we really should teach. Like, I don't understand why anyone wouldn't have that desire.
I think that, this whole idea that it should come naturally, that it shouldn't
That's ridiculous.
That shouldn't, like, this one area of your life there should be no educational component, is really what kind of underlies a lot of that thinking. If you just tuned in, you missed 45 minutes of some pretty hot and heavy conversation, I might say, with two amazing young feminists. We've got Jess Beaulieu, we've got Sarah Ratchford, Sarah journalist, Jess podcaster and comic, and we're talking all about what's going on in the feminist universe right now. What other issues I think are important? I mean, I'm as I say, an old broad, and I remember like the key issues of feminism from the 70s. We still don't have them. We still don't have, control over our bodies. I mean, in fact, it's getting worse in the States, where they're closing, abortion clinics and, attacking women and doctors. We don't have equal pay for equal work. We still earn like 72, 73 cents on the dollar. We still don't have affordable, universally accessible childcare, which means that women will never be equal, because let's face it, the childcare mainly falls to women. Why is this? Like, I sort of, I want to sort of pull my hair out and say, why is this?
Whoa. Yeah, I think women are still viewed as not as people. I want to say. I think that there is also, I feel this way, this is just my personal opinion, that sometimes, like for the example of childcare or, maternity leave, things like this, that women are often encouraged, this is a complicated opinion, but women are often encouraged to be more like men in a lot of ways, like by cisgender men. And the reason I say that is because, like, in the case of, having children, that women are often told that the way to be successful, to gain power, is to avoid having children. But that kind of goes against what all of feminism is about, which is having choice. And I think that instead of telling women what to do with their bodies, that we should create a system to give them a right to do whatever they want and to support them. And I think that in the case of childcare, for some reason, this is still like so connected to women, specifically in femininity, and men aren't really still held responsible if they are the father of the children. And even paternity leave is still something that is so not accepted by so many industries, which is confusing to me. Like, I even know men who have requested paternity leave, and a lot of workplaces have denied them that right. And then the woman has to stay away from her job for longer. And that to me is like such a problem, that like we are also like,
that's why we earn 73 cents on the dollar.
Exactly.
And the 73 cents is white women on the dollar of a white
course.
man.
Exactly.
Just put that out there.
True. Good point. Absolutely.
But I mean, it's something that even though I talk about menstruation a lot, where it's like, if you're a cisgender woman and you do still menstruate, there's so much pain associated with that. There's so many like health concerns that women have, like, especially it varies. Some women have no problems with their period, and they kind of go on their day as they would normally during their cycle, and other women it's very debilitating, but there's still so much shame associated with that. I think because being like a woman is still like, you're not respected as much as being a man. And so if you have a condition specifically, or there's anything to do specifically with women, it is not considered serious, I guess, in a lot of ways. Am I being clear?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sarah.
absolutely. Okay. Yeah. I go in to see my doctor for issues related to being a woman or a uterus-bearing person.
Yeah.
And I tell the doctor, I'd like to have an IUD put in. And they have talked me. I'm somebody who writes about these issues for a living, right? And I'm almost 30 years old, and they talked me out of it. They made me so anxious. They talked me out of it, made me throw up. I went to the washroom, was ill, came back, asked for a glass of water, was given a warm orange juice, and left the office with a new script for a lower hormonal birth control pill, which I didn't fill, but I was just shocked, put straight into an emotional gutter by this, because what if I had been 16 and asked for an IUD, right? I would have been in an even worse condition and just stayed on the pill forever, even though it was making me really imbalanced. So yeah, no one takes our concerns seriously.
But why is that? Why is so little progress been really made? I'll compare it to another file, for example, I've also been an activist on for forever, and that's the LGBTQ file, where, we've made some huge ground. Same-sex marriage is legal, everything's fine. We're into transgender issues now, added to the human rights. I mean, there have been actually some really significant gains made in Canada and in Ontario on that file. But, those core demands of feminism, really, from the second wave of feminism, are still unmet.
That's because our system is set up such that it works best if women are at home doing what they're told.
Yeah. I think so too. And again, I think that until, for the example, like the issue of childcare, like until men take responsibility for their portion of it, and also the rest of the world acknowledges that they are also responsible for this, nothing will change. Like, this will remain it will remain on the shoulders of women, and like it is such a social expectation still for women to stay home and take care of children. Like, the issue of emotional labor has come up so much on the internet recently about how women are expected to care for the emotional needs of men, and men, especially in, again, heterosexual relationships, romantic ones, especially, it's not reciprocated. Even housework is still so much on the shoulders of women. So it's like women have to work full time.
There's another issue, housework.
It's
still
like,
mainly a female field.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why though?
I read a thing the other day saying husbands create 7 hours of work per week for their wives. 7 hours.
7 hours.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
See, that's, for somebody who's older, that's kind of depressing because, we thought we'd made some progress in that field.
But now it's like women have even more pressure because they have more, they have other tasks that they need to complete. So now, we're expected to be, high-powered attorneys and be working 90 hours a week. But then we're also supposed to
be
go
perfect parents,
kids.
perfect partners, and perfectly dressed at all times.
You're supposed to want to bang your husband every day and breastfeed 3 children while you do it.
But at the same time, our concerns aren't taken seriously. So it's like, I don't, even maternity leave, even though it does, again, women are expected to take care of the children, that is still frowned upon. It's like, if a woman is pregnant, she's also like, well, I'm not going to promote.
Well, hey, south of the border, they don't even have it. I mean, think about it. For American women, the maternity leave is not, it's not in law.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's like we lose either way. That's what the point I'm trying to say. It's like a catch-22. You're like, okay, I won't have children, but then I'm not as respected as much or something, or men that I want to marry won't marry me, or because I won't give birth to their offspring. But at the same time, if I do have that, my career is gonna hurt. But it's like, well, how do I operate then in this world?
Sometimes it seems like as far as we've come is congratulations, ladies, y'all can go to work now, and then fight about whether or not you can have it all. Right?
Exactly.
Have fun.
Well, really, when you consider it, partly it's economic, of course, and I think you hit on that too. I mean, it really does help capitalism to have this huge pool of pink ghetto workers. But I mean, really, of my mother's generation, so the classic housewife where there wasn't, the help wanted male, female, where she is at home raising money. I mean, she may have been on drugs because that's the only way she could do it. But aka Betty Friedan's books. But I mean, really, her life, on one salary, you could buy a house in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
One salary, you could have a car. And if you were kind of middle class and got together with your relatives, you could have a cottage too.
Yeah.
So now you need 2 salaries and you can barely afford a down payment on a tiny condo. And, again, the issue of childcare is more pressing because there isn't any.
Well, for sure. I definitely think that capitalism hurts women and people of color the most. You know, like it's just, it's really unfortunate. Like if you're having a child, like again, if you're a cisgender woman and you're bearing that child, there's going to be more responsibility on you. And a lot of heterosexual men do have the option to leave, and that is not an option a lot of women that are having children have. And then it's like you're a single mother. You're also supposed to be taking care of your children and having a job. And the economy isn't great. Like it's incredibly difficult to function in this world.
Just a shout out to out there in Twitterland, the good tweeters who are saying, loving the show, listening every minute, lapping it up. First time listener. So again, we got Jess Beaulieu, we've got Sarah, a journalist and comic / podcaster in studio live, which is so exciting. So we've only got about 5 minutes left. Let's look to the future with some rosy colored glasses on and think about what we need to do to make this all better. My ears were ringing when you were talking about that secret Facebook group about targeting rapists. There's one. How do women get involved in that if they've been assaulted and the situation is not right? Because let's face it, it rarely is that you can bring charges against the person who does it, but you want to represent. What do you do?
Right. So, I mean, the issue there is that those groups are illegal. So under Canadian defamation speech, it's illegal to come out and say X person is a rapist. If they haven't been
explain this to me. So I can say legally that I think you should be raped, but I can't defend myself against that legally.
Yeah.
You gotta love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Love it.
Joyous times. Yeah. So to get involved in those groups, I guess what I would do if I weren't already part of them is I would find just whoever I knew who was a survivor or a feminist who speaks out a lot on the internet and just ask her, hey, do you know any of these groups? And just keep asking a few people. We just have to know that whoever's in the group is I hate to use this word because I don't want to exclude anyone, but is trustworthy, right? Because we can get in legal trouble. So I mean, if we want to go sort of outside the current system, that is a thing that is in place. Also, better counseling funding really helps. So, I mean, if governments wanted to step up and provide that, that's another alternative.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Jess, what do you think? What do we need to do?
Yeah, I agree that having a supportive network is definitely very helpful. I know that within comedy, because it's the industry that I work in, within entertainment, again, because this is being talked about right now, sexual assault so much within the comedy community across North America, that there has been a lot of action taken against rapists, men who are harassing female comedians or their students within different cities. I know some pretty high-profile teachers have been let go in Chicago recently. Certain comics have been banned from certain clubs, and this is all because of what Sarah said about like kind of an underground community of a supportive network of women. Also, workplaces taking accusations seriously. You go to human resources and you say, my boss assaulted me or is harassing me or my coworker's doing this, that, those people in power need to take what women are saying seriously as opposed to just brushing it aside. I definitely know that I've been brushed aside a lot. So I think we need to believe women generally, and I think that men need to become more aware of the status that they have, the privilege they have, and sometimes the
men should be in women's studies courses.
Yes, the negative power that they have. They need to be socialized out of the way they are socialized.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We've just got a minute left. I want to say thanks to all those who are listening. Thanks to our tech, Sharef. Thank you so much. And Louis, welcome aboard. Thank you to Sarah.